here to talk about today? We're here to talk about which messages do you deliver first? How do you journey along with your target to close? I mean, that's the ultimate hope, right? So, we're all familiar with, there's a lot of discussion right now about the customer journey. And that customer journey is defined by sort of the common experiences, the common path that any type of customer, be it B2B, B2C, take as they're going through and selecting your company or your brand. And most often that customer journey is really marked by the fact that it's determining the touch points, the tactics, or the medium that are intercepting people. There's some specific situations where that customer journey is not enough to fully act on and know what messages come first. And the biggest situation is the considered purchase. The considered purchase is, of course, any complex buying decision that has a high degree of financial or emotional risk and reward. So it's anything that is not an impulse purchase, but that really requires more investigation, consideration, generally a higher price point, maybe involves more people in the decision. And when we get into considered purchases, we get into the time that by the time they purchase, there's probably been about 20 touch points. It's not something that they just, impulsively purchase. So this could be anything from a service from a professional services company to a piece of software, to a large piece of furniture, to a college degree, to who's the best doctor for my chronic illness. All of those highly considered purchases. And in that case, we need really something that we call a dialogue strategy to connect the message sequence with that customer journey sequence of touch points so that we're delivering the right messages in the right order to people at the right time. And there's a basic framework for this. So ideally, dialogue strategy is a means of taking them through a progression, just kind of like a virtual salesperson, making sure that each interaction we're becoming more tightly focused on the relevant messages for their situation, for their segment within your target segment, for their personal place in the life cycle, and for what they really want to buy from you. And I think we all kind of intuitively know about some of these, but when we put it into a cycle, and then from here we begin to break this down into literally each hour of this clock, we can see sort of what they're going through. So the dialogue strategy always starts with acquisition, which is what every marketer kind of thinks about as the most important part of their job. But really, the marketer is involved with it all the way around the circle. So we start with acquisition, which is basically trying to get people to contact your company. Then we go into sales, where we've made contact with them and we're trying to convince them to purchase our product. Then we move into a cycle of service and delivery, and that's literally the first time that they want to talk to you more than you want to talk to them. This is when they're excited about getting what's happening. They have lots of questions about the process and how it's going to be delivered. And then finally, we move into retention. And the funny thing about retention is this is the area where a lot of people just drop off. They really actually don't work on this. So the marketer is supposed to go with them the entire way. And in a highly considered purchase, really the marketing quadrant, it does not get to drop off at all. The acquisition quadrant is not enough to completely close a sale. So there are specific things we need to do as marketers in each of these quadrants. In the first quadrant, we need to show that we can relate to the target's need. We need to not sell them on our product, and this is where in a highly considered purchase, sometimes messaging moves too fast. We need to gain entry into their consideration set of possible solutions to that pain or need. And then we need to drive urgency to make contact with all of their considered options. That's our job in acquisition. And a lot of times we work too hard in acquisition to go too far, to get too deep into pricing, to get too deep into comparing ourselves to our competition. Then in the second, once they've made contact with the company, whether it's identifying themselves in email or actually asking to speak to a live person, we need to qualify that lead, determine what type of target audience they are, if they are a correct type of target audience, and collect information about that so that we can develop that relationship more personally, and we can put together a proposal and put the close process into place to get them to close. The third quadrant, they've become a customer. We want to make sure that they are happy. So before we hand them off, we want to make sure that there's some initial onboarding communications, if there's any questions about the financial process for payment, because worst thing that can happen is you get a customer and then they don't want to pay. We orient them, we train them, and we provide them with any warranty, guarantee information, things like that. And then finally, marketing really becomes active again when we pick up and we want to gain some success stories from them. We want to retain them if it's a long-term engagement, or re-engage them if it's something that they've completely completed their purchase with us. And we want to really support the product success. So specifically, I mentioned before that a lot of us have thought through what our customer journey is. And we have already worked to identify all of the touch points. So I just kind of mapped those touch points on here. So if you're working on a customer journey, you may have a lot of different things that people use to research you in the acquisition phase. Anything from your ads to publicity about you, search engine, social, any of those things. And those are still important. It's still important for us to know those customer journey points that occur in order to be able to know that we're going to need to message into each of those. So at this point, in sort of understanding this process, we know kind of what our role is as a marketer, and we know what our customer journey is, but we still don't know which messages to deliver. And this is where dialogue gets really neat, because there's actually specifically an order which most people kind of go through as the consumer making decisions about a product that we can tap into. So if we look at our dialogue clock, and this is a basic dialogue clock for any industry, any product. We do some more specific ones for specific industries and situations, and we'll show an example of a couple of those. And you can do the exact situation that you're working on yourself after we get through this. But the first place that we start with any consumer is relating to a pain. So of course, our job as marketers is to identify people that have a need for our product, not create a need for our product. So we identify something in their real life that's uncomfortable. And from that, we then begin to journey with them, because as a person would do, they go, okay, I have a problem. I'm spending too much money every month on this activity, or I've got really a bad item that has just fallen apart, or there's a seasonal change that's happening, something that happens that's not about you. And we relate to that pain. The very first messaging that we send out is just saying, we get it. We know there's a trend towards people not wanting to choose four-year universities, for instance. That people think their money is being wasted on college. That might be a pain that exists in the world that we didn't create, and we could market against that. So then we would identify the possible solutions. So not the possible companies, but the different ways you could solve something. Can I buy? Should I build the solution? Where can I shop for that solution? Just all the categories of possible solutions that they might be looking at. So just something we can all relate to as consumers in our own life is, let's say that the pain is that my car broke down. The possible solutions for that are to fix it or to buy a new car. And within that, the categories exist for leases or purchase, used or new. And so basically we're talking about the category of solution. We're not down to which brand of car do I want yet. In the third phase of talking to people, that's when they're ready to start making a consideration list. Not picking one, but picking the number of people that they're going to talk to and research. And that's where we start to differentiate ourselves. So we related to their pain. We've identified the different categories and said our category of solution is better. And then now we're talking about within the category of people that provide that type of solution, why should they include us in the people they look at more? Not why should they buy a shed? Why should they include us? Why would they really be missing out and not have fully explored everything if they don't include us at that point? It's at that point then that they begin to do the research to make a practical decision. And they make that contact to that consideration set. And that's when we go into the quadrant that we're calling sales, but it may not leave the marketing department yet. So they make contact. They are going to talk about the specifics of what their problem is and what they need help with. So this is when they're very willing to give us more information to be able to respond to them appropriately. So at the point of contact, we want to make sure that any time that they contact us, that we're qualifying them in some way. So if they're filling out just a form to get in touch on your website, just a couple questions that just really narrow the field a little bit so that you can have more specific conversations with them. Because the next thing that's going to happen after that is, and this is the thing everybody always wants to run to, is that's when you're going to actually establish your value. This is the first time you really want to talk about price. This is the first time you really want to talk about how different you are than your direct competition. At that point, this is where you have enough information about what segment audience they are, which pain did they come in with, and you can talk to them very specifically about how you solve the pain for this type of customer in the context of what they're likely to purchase with you and how much it costs. So at that point, this is your big sale moment. After that, the next point is to make sure that you remove barriers. So a lot of times sales will give you feedback that you need to market all of these things way up at the beginning of it because they become sales barriers to close later on. But really, this is when, as marketers, we then prepare for that barrier to come up and how we're going to overcome it at that point. If it's not something that we can overcome late in the process, then we put it up in qualifying and we kick them out before we even spend time on them. So marketing's job is to really just get people to consider us, intercept the right people that are having pain, get them to consider us, find out more about them, and then really move in for the first time with a value proposition, and then finally remove barriers. So in order to do that, there are some things we have to know. We have to know what are the actual pains for our customers. Why are they actually moving into an active purchase cycle? And that point we do a lot when it comes to messaging of relating to their language. We give them tools to calculate or quantify their issue. We talk about trends that are happening in this space of people that are having the same problem, but we don't offer solutions. In order to be able to go through this sequence too, we also have to know what category we're in and what their other options are for them to purchase something. So for instance, Chase, you're in the category of custom made, and other people are in the category of maybe sort of this, big box solution. So you're going to want to really separate yourself from that. Mike, in your situation, you may have a situation where it's buy versus build, or do it yourself versus use our service. So those are the categories you're going to want to kind of push things and separate things in level 2. And level 3 is when you really need to know who is your direct competition, who are the people that they are most likely really looking and comparing you to, and be willing to make that differentiator in a way that just says, continue to look at us, not you should buy us over them, that says, this research that you're doing right now is not complete unless you've considered our solution. Then we create urgency for contact. That's when we basically talk about things like it might be the cost of waiting, how much money you're losing if you wait to start this process later, or it could literally be missing a limited time opportunity, like a limited run of a special product. Then we go through, do we have in place the right sales conversations, the right ability to qualify and segment our audience? And then that's when we make that, number 6 is a really important moment. That's when we make the price versus our point of differentiation argument. And we need to be able to make it well, and we need to make it in the language of each of the individual segments that we've qualified. And then finally, we need to know what those common barriers are at the end of the sale, and we can provide tools to remove those common barriers. So things like, I'm too nervous, I don't have the time to deal with this, or how are we going to pay for this? Do we pay for it over time? Just those really detailed conversations, those happen at the end, and we just really provide support to our direct sales or service people. So to walk through this in a way that we can all kind of relate to it, I put up one in the healthcare space. We all have purchased healthcare at some point. So the healthcare situation, you would have the pain that comes into someone's mind is that they're either a worried well person or info seeker on a very specific issue. So let's say that they have cardiac issues that run in their family, and it is Heart Health Awareness Month, and they are suddenly thinking about their own wellness. That would be a worried well sort of pain. Or an info seeker could be somebody that they just took their blood pressure and they found out suddenly they have high blood pressure and now they have an urgent need. So there's the different, we would enumerate the types of pains that would put them into this purchase cycle. And then they look at the categories of solutions. Okay, do I want to go to my regular doctor and proceed that way? Or do I want to go to the heart hospital and become part of their special screening program and go to a specialist? So that's like a categories that they're weighing. And then after we convince them that the best category is to come to, for instance, the heart hospital specialist and go around, maybe your normal internist, let's say, then we start talking about the providers within that. So you could go to Ascension Heart Hospital, or you could go to the ABC pulmonary specialist, or not pulmonary, cardiac specialist. So then we get to actually talk about how you need to look at each of these ones. And we start doing messages like saying, we're the top in the category. So if you're looking at this category, you would of course want to look at us, or we're the most innovative in this category. We have solutions not available somewhere else. Those kind of messages that say your exploration isn't going to be complete until you talk to us. We create an urgent moment, something that is a limited time for them to reach out and talk to us. So for instance, sometimes somebody will send out something that says now booking throughout the end of the year to get in on this year's insurance. That would be the sort of thing in your life that might drive a highly considered purchase forward to contact. They make contact with sales. And at that point, we're a hot lead for a practice like this. We go through all the things that have to do with whether we're the right case, whether we're the right fit, do they take our insurance, all of that. And then if they actually will take the appointment, make the appointment, they meet all of the things for us, then we become somebody that they just need to remind to show up for that appointment. That's kind of our case acceptance point. So that's what that sort of looks like. One of our very last obstacles to barrier would be that we no show or forget. And so that's what it looks like for healthcare. Now, this same process is something that happens in every situation, every purchase. It's just identifying what are those milestones for our product. As I mentioned, it happens for every situation. So if we took high ed and did the same thing to it, we would actually have slightly different phases at each point on the clock, but there is a phase for each of those specific steps. And so it's really our job as marketers to get to identifying this map in a way that works really well. And to do that, we need to just know our product and have made a lot of decisions. And then this is just a great construct for putting that together. So if we have our identified pain points, then we can start this process and we can determine what are the possible solutions people are weighing us against. And what are the reasons that they could not possibly not think of us in our category for contact? Then our job is always to make sure that we've got some urgency, to make sure that they're not just putting this on their list and it's being knocked down below the other things that are urgent. And then at that point, we have to figure out how to determine and get rid of the people we don't want to be working with and determine what we should be talking about with the people that we should be working with. It's only at level 6 that we finally make our value argument fully to people. And at that point, we can make it highly relevant. And then the last thing is if we're losing sales at the last moment, how do we get some winning arguments to keep those obstacles for throwing us off track at the end without overreacting and putting those too early in the cycle, which is the way a lot of times, I can say this freely because I don't think anybody from sales is on here, but a lot of times a salesperson that has been burned by these obstacles will want to make sure that that same thing doesn't happen next time. And so they'll put them as primary messaging early in the cycle. And that's kind of jumping the gun. So a quick primer on dialogue strategy. We'd love to hear if you guys have any questions about problems you're having on messaging or communicating to your audience or anywhere that you're getting stuck.